Hello and welcome to our webinar, How Abingdon and Witney College Saved Time and Money with Process Automation. I'm Niamh Lorden, Marketing Manager at FlowForma, your host for this webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping and offer a few tips for participating today. Please note this webinar is being recorded. If you've any trouble logging into audio or any other issues throughout the webinar, please email info@flowforma.com for support. Throughout the webinar, your lines will be muted, but you can use the Q&A function to ask questions, which we'll answer at the end. And after the webinar today, I'll share a copy of the recording with all registrants. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Knowing that our audience love hearing real-world customer insights, I'm delighted to be joined by two of FlowForma's customers today. Lucy Wheatcroft, Business Analyst, and Mark Lay, Finance Director, both from Abingdon and Witney College. Mark and Lucy, I'd really like to thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, it's nice to be here.
Hi, good to be here.
Thanks, guys. I'm also joined by Shay O'Connor, who's Head of Solutions here at FlowForma.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks, Shay. So the highlight of our webinar today is really a live interview with Abingdon and Witney College, which will then be followed by a short demonstration of the FlowForma process automation tool. And then we'll finish up just before the hour with a Q&A, questions from you, the audience. So now I'll hand you over to Shay, who will kick off our case study interview. So over to you, Shay.
Thanks, Niamh. Hi, everybody. I just want to reiterate that we're delighted to have Lucy and Mark here today to participate in this case study spotlight. It's pretty exciting from our point of view because the guys have become really innovative in their thinking towards how they can bring efficiency to their college, and it being the brainchild of Mark. We talked a few years ago, Mark, and sort of brought this all to fruition, and with the help of Lucy have actually brought processes and made them live. So today we want to get a spotlight on the experiences and how the guys got up and running and the impact, etc. And it literally is through a series of questions that we want to get some sort of a better insight. So just to kick off, guys, can you just tell us something about Abingdon and Witney College and your roles there, just to give people a perspective?
Hi, Shay. Yes, good to talk to you, and thanks for bigging us up so much at the beginning there.
No problem.
So Abingdon and Witney College, we're a further education college based in Oxfordshire in England. Each year we train about 14,000 full and part-time students, and they could be studying a variety of courses, either accredited or non-accredited. We've got about 700 staff, full and part-time roles, based in 3 campuses and 3 satellite centres around Oxfordshire. I'm part of a 5-member senior management team, and I have oversight of finance, IT, estates and procurement. I joined the college coming up to 5 years ago, and it was my first role in education. And one of my key roles here is really focusing on improving internal processes.
Hi, Shay. I'm Lucy. I'm the college's business analyst. I've worked at the college for about 4 years now, but in this particular role for about 2.5 years. So before this, I was working in the central administration team, so I had a pretty good knowledge and understanding of all of the college's internal processes.
Super. Thanks, guys. And I mean, from our point of view, just in relation to any organization looking at digitizing their manual processes and or improving what they have, this mechanism and the fact that you would have a sponsor within the organization like Mark, who your remit, even though you might have decided yourself, was to improve process, and then to have an implementer, so to have somebody within the organization who gets to know the nuts and bolts. It's, from our point of view, it's a perfect setup. Just to roll on from there, about the pain points in in Abingdon and Witney, what were they, and that made you look for a process automation tool?
Sure. Well, coming from commerce and industry, where I'm used to having one ERP system that manages all the sort of processes in the organisation, when I joined the college, I realised that we've got various standalone systems that manage student management, finance, HR and payroll, and none of these systems were talking to each other. And then because of the nature of education, we had a lot of processes, so like health and safety management, risk assessments and so on, that sat completely outside of these processes, or the systems that we had in place.
Okay.
We also had lots of paper-based processes, so often forms would get lost or misplaced, and due to being on multiple sites, forms being transported from one site to another, forms were being passed back and forward if there were errors or missing information, and just being on paper was really hard to keep track of all of that, and where a request had got to it in the process and where that form was sitting currently. And who was sort of responsible for passing it on or holding that process back. And additionally, we didn't have, we were unable to report accurately on these processes or even produce much data at all surrounding them.
Yeah, so it's funny, you're sort of covering core areas for any organization who are considering digitizing processes and automating, because Marcus, you were saying like most organizations will have core systems there, and then but in order for them to talk to each other and in order for you to fill the gaps, it's very difficult to sort of to fill those gaps unless you bring in something else, and usually what is there is manual. So that's the gap filler. It's sort of, hey, how do we do X and Y? Well, you know, hey, we've got a form for that, and then you end up updating different systems. So I totally get that angle, and it's funny, some organizations that look at digitizing, they may only have one reason like that. They may say, hey, we only have manual process, we just want to get rid of those. But the fact that you not only have systems that you need to bring together, and you have the manual scenario, and then the upshot of the reporting, to have the likes of FlowForma fill in those gaps and to give you data integrity, it's a big leap for you guys. Like, it's a big change in the way of operating, I would guess.
Yeah, very much so. In old world paper-based processing, you have lots of administrators sitting around keying information into spreadsheets and so on that are then passed on and and then someone else will try and use that data to turn it into information. And you almost, if you're not careful, you breed a culture of not right first time. So there's almost an acceptance that the form is probably filled out wrong. And the process allows that to happen because someone's in a hurry, so they'll sign that form and pass it on to the next person. Digitizing it takes a lot of that away.
Yeah, that's incredible, because it's funny, you actually have to remind me of one of the sort of initial things I was told when getting into the process arena. It was that a lot of organizations say would concentrate on the workflow. So you see, okay, you know, it goes from this here to here, and you know, you're looking at your swim lanes and all that lovely stuff, but nobody was focusing on the information that was being passed. And that's a really good point, Mark, that when you are involved with, say, documents passing between different entities in a process, if you don't focus on what, you know, the integrity of the information, you do get that forward and back scenario, and that, you know, people fill out things inaccurately or miss out on things because obviously it's difficult to get validation on manual forms. So it's really ticking the box of all the rationale about why you would digitize, you know. But no, thanks a million for that, Mark. Just on our moving on from our next question. So what are your requirements for an automation tool? We've seen, okay, you know that the sort of problems that you had in regards to the issues you wanted to solve. So when you looked at looking for an automation tool, what requirements did you list out?
Sure. Well, I think, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, as I mentioned previously, some of the processes that we were, some of the stuff that we were processing here are things that I'd never seen in any other business before. We hadn't had to worry about before. So I'd never seen a system that could cope with everything that we would want it to do. But the other side of it is we're in further education, and if anyone's listening in who works in FE as well, is that we've had quite a few funding cuts over the last few years. So even if that system was out there, a SAP version of what we need is out there, I'm not in a position to be able to go and buy it. So initially what we did was, so I joined in 2015, and in 2016 we realised that there was work to be done, but we hadn't really got our heads around what that might look like. And I cajoled, if you like, to get 20 of our business support staff to take an NVQ in business improvement techniques. And that took us all about 6 months to do, and it was quite a useful exercise in terms of, as well as learning how to think about being a lot more lean and a lot more efficient in our own workplace. It actually showed us that a lot of our cross-college processes were quite broken and really hard to follow. Needed not just a fix, but actually needed re-engineering from the start. And by the end of that process, we'd actually realised that as a group, spending a couple of hours a week, we weren't going to be able to fix all of those. So in early 2017, I was given the okay to appoint Lucy as business analyst and really to lead on this initiative.
The college uses Office 365 as its main platform, so it was really important that we had a product that could be used with Office, not just technically, but in order to keep things continual and familiar for the staff and students here. The last thing we wanted to do was introduce another piece of software or another system for the staff. Low code was also a requirement, as we wanted a solution which would be quick to implement using the resources that we had available to us at the time.
Just on that, the Mark, what you were saying about basically, becoming more efficient and becoming more lean. A lot of times you hear the phrase, time equals money, and for the most part, that is quite accurate. But there's also another side to it. So you were just effectively trying to get more from your current workforce. So what you had in existence, you're never going to be able to output more unless you become more efficient.
No, completely. And our task very much was to look at how we could automate some of the processes to enable those staff to do more analytical work. Rather than just pushing bits of paper around. I mean, and it's great from our point of view that the Office 365 integration is marvelous, because Lucy, as you're saying, because you already have that environment there, you basically are bringing in an application or a platform that sits on top of an existing environment, so you don't really have to worry about like installs or any of that sort of thing. And that'll be accurate enough,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was really easy for us to get up and running pretty quickly.
The lack of, and I know I haven't chatted to you about this really in any detail, but before the no coding element, like you getting up to speed, how comfortable are you as a business analyst just dipping your toes in there and getting stuck into the product?
Yeah, really confident. I mean, I have a colleague in our IT services team who does help me with the building of the processes, but I can still build them myself. I'm not reliant on somebody with technical knowledge.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's funny. It's one of the areas that I guess a lot of organizations wouldn't have much exposure to platforms that don't require coding, that you don't have to sift through code in order to see what you should and shouldn't do. Especially, I would imagine, if nobody looks at a process that's been running for 6 months and then you want to say make a change to it, when you pop in, it's always refreshing to know that you don't have to sift through code to make any changes.
Completely, and I think also part of that is, and a key part of Lucy's role is at the design stage, and us really understanding what the process is that we're trying to create, getting buy-in from the business to really agree that we've mapped out the right process and taking out unvalue-added steps in there, so that we only then create what's really needed by the business and gives us the right outputs.
Brilliant. I mean, that is very important to have that knowledge of this is the way the process should work, as distinct from, hey, let's just throw something together. Having an analyst who knows that, yeah, well, this is the best way we should do it, makes it a lot easier to implement any of your changes or any of your new processes, for sure.
Yeah, completely. And Lucy coming into the role from being already working within the college, and her role previously was in sort of central administration, meant that she really had a good understanding of how the college worked. I think it would have potentially taken, if we brought somebody in from the outside, it would have taken them longer to get up to speed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, now just moving on there. Can you tell us some of the processes? So specifically now, from your journey point of view, you recognize that you need to do something, then you recognize what you need to bring in place, and you've in your case you've got FlowForma sitting there in your Office 365. So can you tell us about some of the processes that you actually automated?
Yeah, sure. So to actually decide, I think one of the biggest challenges we had was actually at the start to decide which ones we were going to attack and do something with, because there were so many processes within the college. That we could work on. And from the group that had gone through the business improvement techniques, MVQ, we had a great big long list of things we wanted to attack. So what we really looked at, well, which of these processes had the highest volumes? So which would make the biggest difference when they were automated? Once we decided which ones had the biggest volumes, because some of them actually were a horrible paper process, but if you're only transacting 1 or 2 of them a month, actually, you know what, you can park that for the time being and concentrate on the bigger ones. So we looked at that, and then because it was all completely new to us, the first thing we did was really look at what we thought were relatively easy processes to implement that didn't really contain too much complicated approval flows. And I think what we identified really that the first ones we wanted to tackle were in the health and safety area, because they were very often just forms that someone would fill in a form and send it into health and safety. It was a relatively easy flow. There wasn't lots of approvals they needed to go through. And then from then we moved on to accident reporting and risk assessments, which were quite similar.
Yes. Okay.
We didn't want to just recreate the processes that we already had as existing paper forms. So we actually used the implementation of FlowForma as an opportunity to evaluate all of our existing processes. So I worked with process owners to streamline the process as much as possible, to improve data flows and reporting, just so that we idealize what we want to get out of the process before we started to build it. And then as we go live with each new process, we communicate the change to the business, and we've been training key users, and then we hold project reviews just to ensure that the process meets business needs, and we're continually reviewing what we've got out there for the business.
Yeah, I would imagine that's pretty core and fundamental from an evolution point of view, because most of the analysts will tell you, and well, when you read all the likes of Forrester Research and these guys, they would say that process is fairly fluid and should be considered that way. Because the process is working one way this year, it may not. You may need to alter it as people use it, because the way people operate can change. So having a business analyst who's aware that, hey, we need to review this on a regular basis, I would imagine makes for an even more efficient process.
Yeah, definitely. And I think working in education as well, a lot of our curriculum-based staff, I'd say, aren't particularly process-driven, so they don't fully understand what some of the back office functions are and how they operate. So actually, I'd be lying if I said that we got every process spot on first time. There's always that tinkering after you've gone live, where you find that someone who suddenly pops up and says, I need to be involved in that, or I need to be aware that this is happening, wasn't built into the flow, and that you need to tinker it maybe to address that.
So would you say then that, education on process itself was a nice byproduct of the whole mechanism, of the whole journey, that you're getting people who, as you were describing, Lucy, who would say fill out a form and submit it, and then now you've actually got an environment where they know that there's actually 5 steps in this process. So I don't just submit a form. When I submit my digital form, it actually has to go to different actors in the process to get signed off. Do you think that that education in the process was a nice byproduct?
Absolutely, yeah. It's really helped to get all of our staff on board and understanding what's actually happening with the information that they're filling in. It just helps with relationships between departments as well.
Yeah, yeah. And you were also, I mean, just there, I was really knocked out now with some of the implementations that you had put in, and there, just with the trips and visits process, the type of data that you were able to, from a simple form, as you can see on the left-hand side, the way you then presented all that information for users, etc., and for business owners was fantastic. I mean, can you talk us through what you did here?
Yeah, sure. So we actually connected our FlowForma output to a Power BI, and then we built dashboards surrounding that, so that the management can see the total number of trips, whether it's a long trip, a short trip, an overseas trip, and then also broken down by department, so you can see how many trips are going out. And then we've got the live calendar as well, so that managers can see on this day which students and staff are where.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, Mark, one of the days we had a chat, I remember early on in this scenario, and you were saying that sometimes there might be an occurrence, say in Europe or somewhere around the world, where something happened and you want to know, are any of our students there? Where before you'd have to look up forms and ask people, and now you can just check it out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, luckily we haven't had any issues when we've had students out on trips, but
yeah,
you've always got the risk that something happens. And the likelihood is that in the old days, I'd probably hear about it first of all from either a parent phoning up or asking what's going on, are their children safe, or or reading it on social media myself. Whereas this way, if we hear anything's happening, I can straight away check online on Power BI, see that we've got no one in that city, town, whatever's going on, wherever, and feel comfortable. And this isn't just accessible by me. Anybody with access to this, so pretty much every staff member in the college can access these tables and can see what's going on. It makes everything so much more real time. And the whole trips and visits process, I think of all the flows that we've done, this was easily the most complicated, because there is such a raft of different authorizations within it. Whereas me just sitting in my glass house, all I see is some pretty graphs at the end of it which tell me what's going on, but there's so much work that went in it to get there.
I mean, again, that's always the beauty of something. If you can simplify something, that it makes it easy for people to use, and you can get the outputs easy. I know, Lucy, you'll have the scars to show for getting that to that place, but getting agreement from everybody that this is the way you want it. But it's always nice to see that it then looks so straightforward. I mean, it does take a lot of hard work to get something looking nice and straightforward and easy.
Yeah, it does, but it is absolutely worth it. And we're in a really good place with this process at the moment. All of the staff members have really good buy-in, and that they all see the benefit of it. So yeah, it's been really good. It's been really rewarding to get it this far.
Yeah, and just one of the other ones that you've implemented is your student update form. So that's and again, for the uninitiated among us, can you tell us what this does, and just a bit more background information on it?
Yeah, sure. So when a student enrolls in the college, there's an expectation, and he or she will be signed up to a certain course, and the learning aims that they're going to be studying, etc., will all be recorded. And then also all their personal details, so home address, telephone number, email address, all that type of thing is recorded in the system when they enroll. But during the year, that changes. It might be a personal change where simply, they've moved from A to B, or they change their mobile number, or it might actually be that they're changing course. So what, again, we had in the old days were lots of bits of paper flying around and flying into our student management team with changes on. This systemizes that and takes that away.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. I mean, that for me, that makes so much sense, to be honest, that update of information is current.
Yeah, and what it's done, and I expect Lucy will talk about it more, but it's taken away a lot of the problems we had in the past.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of validation within this form just to make sure that information is definitely accurate and correct before it goes to the next step. A lot of the student data is also pre-populated for the staff members. We didn't want them to have to complete a whole form and try and find the student's date of birth and the student's name when we already have that in the system. So actually they just put in the student's ID number and then it just auto-fills a lot of the information for them just to make that really quick and easy for them.
Super. Yeah.
The authorization flow is known and visible to everyone, so forms don't get lost and the overall process is just far quicker and much more accurate, and we have a better audit trail of forms to support compliance.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the advancement in regards to the efficiency of what you guys are achieving here is pretty impressive, because, you know, a lot of us were in college and or further education, or, you know, where you're down to your own means and, you know, you don't have your parents taking care of you. And that responsibility then to be able to keep everything up to date, the fact that you've got a simple mechanism for doing it, that like it just means it's going to be done more efficiently. So it's going to be done, it's going to be easier to put in the changes. And the fact that I would imagine the more that people see the results of this, the more they buy into the fact of, hey, this is really making a difference, and it makes things a lot easier for me. It makes a lot more it simplifies everything. So I have to say, I love what you guys have done, and I know I can tell by even by the look of that screen there with the steps. You've got dynamic features in there where other steps will kick in under certain criteria. So that whole dynamic nature of not bombarding people with too much information, they literally get to see what they need to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple of hidden steps in there, and if a question was triggered, then that step would then show. So one of them was if there's a change to an English or maths aim, then our head of department for English and maths also has to approve that change. So just keeping it as simple as possible, but then having the flexibility to allow it to respond to the answers that are given within the form is great.
Yeah, so if it needs to be more detailed, it can be more detailed, but it's not there in the first place. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. So now you've got all of these processes up and running. Now I know you guys have a lot of plans for other things, but even focusing on what you've done so far, what type of results did you actually realize out of all of this? So just,
Sorry.
I mean, yeah. That was
sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no worries, Marcus. Okay. Usually when I speak, people fall asleep all right during that.
Yeah, I nearly nodded off, Shay, honestly.
Yeah, it's totally understandable.
No, the slide that you've brought up is pretty self-evident, really, isn't it? I mean, the amount of hours that we've saved in these processes. I'm the finance director, so obviously cost is going to be a key, in reducing costs and improving efficiency is key to my role. But I have to say that the quality of the data and information that we're now getting out of these processes is just as important. But if you add up those, I mean, we've saved over 5,000 hours there, and a lot of that is bits of different people's roles. So it's managers approving things quicker. So it isn't that I've just been able to take 5,000 hours of time out of the business. There has definitely been reductions in business support staffing in some areas because of this.
Yes.
But the clever thing is turning that time into doing more value-added stuff instead.
Yes. So again, back to what I was saying earlier on, you're gauging this on how much more you can do out of the resources that you have.
Definitely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's funny, a lot of organizations who would have, say, implemented digital processes and have, say, FlowForma working for a while for them, they end up just running with it, you know. So they use the processes and they're delighted, and some people show us a return on investment from a monetary point of view. But when you actually, and if you ask them how much more efficient have you got, they just say, oh, the they give you a percentage because they say, oh, we can do things a lot more efficiently. Some people have made the effort to say, yeah, oh, we're 60% more efficient because we know the output of this department has increased by this amount, that sort of thing. But like to have actually have the wherewithal to focus and see, well, you know, what benefit are we getting out of this? It gives real, now from our point of view, and I know from yours, but for us, it gives real tangibility, and it's a real proud scenario from our point of view to see that you can, even from individual processes, and they all have differing savings, but you can actually put in a whole environment that makes everything more efficient and run better, to give you a bit more time and space to do the actual job you're there to do, and not be, you know, knee deep in administration. So that type of information for us is, I mean, it's gold dust from our point of view, and long may it continue. But to be honest, though, it actually as well, it illustrates that not every process is the same from an impact point of view, that some vary, you know, some have a greater impact than others. And I'm sure, yeah, you've seen that yourselves. Okay, obviously their trips and visits is the biggest winner. And then, but student risk, even though it saved less time, you would probably feel this is a really important application of this process.
Yeah, certainly. I think for something like risk assessments, where the health and safety team is very small in the college, so that's a huge amount of saving in their area, which makes a big difference to them. Whereas the trips and visits saving, there's so many different departments within the college that touch that process. So it's, you know, it's only a few hundred hours maybe in each department, but it adds up across the whole college. So the benefits with that aren't maybe as noticeable in one area as something like in health and safety. In health and safety, what Lucy's done there is completely revolutionised the way that they administer the whole process. So it's fantastic.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah. Now, just, I mean, this is actually, strangely enough, is our last question. We've pretty much covered most of this anyway, but just from a sort of a reiteration and summary, because in fairness, there's been a lot of information so far. Why is FlowForma, why is it a fit for education?
Well, I mean, I think really, as you say, Shay, we've gone over it already, but I mean, further education is not in a great place financially at the moment. You know, funding is very tight. Hopefully there's you know, the sun's coming up on the horizon, but it's still going to be a couple of years away. So we had to find a low-cost solution, and I don't want to downsell your product, but it is. I can't go out and buy a new SAP system to stick into the college, so we have to we had to look for a low-cost solution, and FlowForma fits that. A lot of our processes, as I said earlier, just don't fit in normal business processes. So there isn't a off-the-shelf package out there that we can go and buy and just plug in. So even if I could afford it, it probably doesn't exist.
And again, it's probably too expensive. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is a real cost-effective way that we can achieve what we're trying to get to.
Because usually you find bespoke systems appear all the time, but the reality is as you say, the further education, your purse strings are well monitored. So you're not going to get somebody coming up because they'll want to make big profits out of it, and etc. And they ain't getting it out of further education.
No, not at the moment.
No. And obviously, sorry, I cut in on your mark, but the no code element obviously means that you guys can do it yourself.
Yeah, and to a certain extent that comes back to cost as well, doesn't it? We can't afford to go out and employ expensive architects to help us create some of this stuff. So being able to do it from pretty much our existing staffing is fantastic. And as you said earlier, that things change over time. So continually the business is developing and changing, and we need to be able to amend those flows. So the ease of us being able to do that is really important.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get it, and I know we have chatted about it a few times and reiterated, but it is a core fundamental rationale around why at all further education or an organization who's keeping an eye on money, but yet still wants to become more efficient and get more out of the workforce. I mean, what do you do? What do you throw on that? Do you make people work longer hours, or you just put in environments that make them more efficient? So all of this is like, as I say, I know we've repeated it a bit, but it is so fundamental to helping out what you're trying to achieve, that it do. I reckon it does warrant being being said a few times, you know. Guys, thanks a million for giving of your time and of your knowledge and experiences in this so far. I'm going to ask you to hang on for a few minutes, because I just want to do literally a really quick dive into FlowForma and just show people around it. And it will be one of the faster ones I've ever done. But I want you to hang on, because I know we do have a couple of questions that have already been submitted. So I might be firing some questions in your direction. But initially, Lucy and Mark, thanks for your time so far.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Now, I just wanted to for people on the call who are not familiar with FlowForma, I just wanted to show you the ability to say, and in this case, it's going to be I don't have time to show you a full creation of a full process, but I'm going to amend an existing process for you. And just to give you an idea, we have some templates here. This is a trial environment we have. So I'm just clicking on a link to open up a simple process for a purchase requisition, which would be common to most organizations. And just to give you an idea of the look and feel of FlowForma, basically, you've got a header area where you can have repeating information, you know, nice logos, everything like that, dates, times, reference numbers. But the big part here is your step bar. So as Lucy was saying earlier on in regards to educating people on a process, you can see here in this purchase requisition process that potentially it has 7 steps, but this will change depending on criteria. So it gives people a bit of knowledge on what is involved in this whole process. Within each step, then, you can see here the different color here, you know which step you're in. You have what we call your questions in the process. Now, I'm not going to bore you by going through a full process with you, but it pulls in information from different databases, etc. So you can link to pretty much anything you want. You can then, so for example, if I just put in some scanned information here, just for illustration purposes, and this is a repeating table, it's basically like a subform, and just, as I say, do a simple calculation. This is going to calculate the total here, and I'm going to submit this. Now, what happens here is that this step then goes to the next step and the next actor within the process. Now, what it's actually doing as well in the background, so it knows by the amount of money that you're looking for that it's now a 5-step process. We only need level 1, and that PO request has actually created a document as well. So one thing to remember with FlowForma, that there's full document generation throughout it. So you can create automatic documentation for any of your processes on the fly as you run through a process. You should never have to input any information more than once. In this case, that document is getting attached to the process, but to the same extent, it could be dispatched to somebody, it could be emailed, it could be put into a certain folder, etc., and held for further use. As you can see, this is just an automatically created form. But what I'm going to do is show you, if I pop out of here, I'm going to show you how quick it is, or how easy it is to amend that. So here, if I go into the flows, now, and this is very important because as Lucy was saying, like, Lucy's a business analyst, so she's not a programmer. And the people that they have working on these processes are not programmers, and you shouldn't have to have a programmer. Now, a programmer will probably have a good insight to it, but they'll also have, say, some bad ways of doing things because they're used to programming. And basically, when you remove programming from any element, you have to think about it slightly differently. We have all of the information you need on your process in one place here. So it's basically it's a 3-in-1. So you get your forms, workflow, and document generation all together here. As you see here in the left-hand side, you've got all your steps in the process, and on the right-hand side, you've got any of the rules that you wish to apply to that process. Within each step, then you've got your data, so the information that you're showing and or that you need to get filled out, and you can see the existing rules that are being applied to these processes. You can do all sorts of things from here. I mean, as you create a process, the graphics to do with that, so the workflow is automatically generated for it also, which is a really nice thing to have. So that from a documentation point of view, you can actually document that process instantly. So you don't have to document it first, then create it. You can start creating the process and allow it to document itself. You also can change the look and feel, etc. But what I wanted to show you primarily is how easy it is to change this. So I'm going to add a step here. Now I could add an existing step because all of the components that you create FlowForma are reusable. So I just do an A and W. So I'm just going to put in a new step, and that'll automatically pop into the bottom of the workflow or the flow. And I'm going to move that up to the top. Now, so when you're creating a process, you literally start adding. The way we would tend to do it is you put in your steps, and then you put in the information that you want contained within those steps, and then you would apply your rules, and then you'd apply your document generation, etc., and your communications and all that sort of nice stuff. Here, for example, now I'm just going to throw in a couple of what we call questions. So you would consider them to be fields, and you can pretty much put in any type of question you like, because here in the question types is a whole suite of options, way more than would be normally available. We have a lot of custom types of question types or field types, the likes of signatures and voting and location services. Some nice options there. If I was to put in, let me see, user name, and my question type here is a person or group. So that's just going to pull in the current user. Now the process is going to know that anyway, but I'm just going to illustrate that for you. So that's my first question. And I'm going to put in just 2 more questions and a simple rule, just for, I'll say for illustration. So simple proceed. And if I could spell, it'd be superb. So I'll say proceed, yes, no. I'm going to make that a yes, no type. And I'm going to make that compulsory, so it's a required field. And save that. And then I'm going to put in simple, 1 more question. Now we're going to just do a little sign off. So if somebody was on a mobile device, we're going to say sign, please. And I'm going to make that a wet signature. And again, I'm going to make that required field and save that. Now here, I'm just going to make that invisible. So you don't need to see that all the time. And this is, again, what the guys were referring to earlier on, that the screen should be lean. So you should only ever see what you need to see. So at the moment, I need to apply a simple rule. And this is where the no code element kicks in. So here on the right-hand side, you've all different areas for different types of rules. I don't think we've added a rule in the last couple of years. So pretty much everything you need to do in a workflow is here, from movement, rights, communication, escalations, everything you can think of. But here I'm just doing a hide show question rule, quite simple. And all of the rules are broken into the sort of same layout. So basically you have a description at the start. I usually like to change that just so I can read through the rules a lot easier. Then you have your conditions. And in these conditions here, it's basically you have the if in your mind. So if something happens or if something occurs. So I'm basically saying that if that question, proceed yes or no, if that equals yes. Now, it could have been, not equals, contains, blank, matches a pattern. I could get more specific in regards to my conditions as well, but I'm going to keep it quite simple for the moment. I'm going to have an action then. So the third part of the rule is the action. So what actually kicks off when that condition is met? And I'm saying that please sign, I'm going to show that. Now, I could do more. And that's how your screens can become very dynamic, where when you make certain selections that certain information is displayed or hidden. And then I'm going to save that. Now that takes, as you can see, moments to do. And that's just to add a full step to a process, add some questions, i.e. some information, and also to add a rule. So the next time I kick off that purchase requisition, that step is there. Now, quite typically, you'd probably go through a UAT scenario or a governance, for getting it promoted, and IT might say they have last say on what goes live, etc. But I'm taking a shortcut here because it's my demo environment. So here I have the two questions. If I try to proceed from here, it's going to say there's a validation area, because proceed yes or no is a required field. So if I said no, now obviously I could have put another rule in there that would quit the process, but if I say yes, it's going to ask me for a signature, and I'll put that cat scroll there and save my signature, and I can then proceed. Very simple process, and very simple addition to the process, but put in very quickly. Now, at the moment, I mean, we haven't touched on a lot of the sort of compliance areas and that sort of thing where FlowForma fits in nicely. I could have had a digital signature or electronic signature attached to that step, which would look for revalidation of your credentials, and it would comply with a lot of governance criteria for compliance to validation of users. Here you also have automatic, the ability to have certain functions that appear automatically at the bottom of the screen. You can switch them on or off, but where you can delegate to somebody else, you can do a pass back if you're not happy. So I could say, listen, I'm not happy to proceed. I'm going to pass it back. And the system knows where that came from. So even though everything's being given to me, the system automatically knows where it came from. I can put in my comments, please sign legibly. And it will go back to the person that has put a decent signature on it. And then the process can move along again. Now, that just gives you a brief look at a FlowForma form that has been output automatically. So the look and feel of the form is generated automatically. You can then amend it to look a certain way. As you saw, the Abingdon and Witney look and feel was different to that, but there's the same structure. That's very, very important, because that familiar structure and layout is so important, because it means that users have a continuity when they get new process kicking in. There's a familiarity to it all. So just from, again, to recap from our point of view, big reasons why FlowForma makes a difference. The no-code element, the fact that you already have an infrastructure in place because of your Office 365 environment. You don't have to worry about that. It is an app that sits on it. Rapid time to value. So the whole no code and time to value, they all mix in together to make sure that things can be turned around faster and more efficiently and more cost effectively. This is just a snapshot of some of our clients who have come on board, and we have over 120 customers worldwide, literally going from the New Zealand over to the west coast of the States. So, and they have all differing requirements and needs, but we would have come across so many different use cases. It is really nice for us to see, say, somebody in education like Abingdon and Witney who have embraced this, because there's now a lot of use cases for the education sector and the impact that that makes to the sector. So we would have different sectors that we can talk about in regards to the impact that digitizing their processes through FlowForma, what is made for them. It is marvelous to have that for education. Now, from our point of view, we want to see what's there. Niamh, from the questions, please.
Yeah, so we have a few minutes left for questions. A few have already come in, so if you have some last minute questions, pop them into the question panel now. I'll start with some questions that have already come in. So Mark and Lucy, one of the first questions that came in was from Becky, and she was just wondering, how do you get your staff and your students to complete those trips and visits forms? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So the forms are all sitting on our SharePoint platform, which staff and students use for everyday working anyway. So we just wanted to make it as easy and as recognisable for them as we possibly could. We do have validation rules in there, and we are quite strict with those validation rules. So there's some time rules in there. So if they don't complete the form by a certain time, the form can't progress, and staff are very aware of that, and they are very organised. It did take some encouraging to start with, but through sort of training and drop-in sessions and tutorials, we actually did get really, really good buy-in from staff.
Great. Thanks for that, Lucy. So I hope that answers Becky's question. I'm sure it does. The next one then from Simon. So another one from Mark and Lucy. So Simon's just saying, amazing job that you guys have done. And he's just wondering, how did you go about prioritising processes for automation?
Well, I think the thing to do, as I might have mentioned earlier, is really you've got to look at which ones have the biggest difference to your organisation. So for us, it was looking at which forms are used, which paper-based processes we use the most throughout the college, and which ones would make the biggest difference by automating them, and starting from top down. I would say pick a couple of relatively easy ones to start with and get your hang of it. But also then by doing that, and especially ones that a lot of staff use, you get buy-in from all of the staff, and they see that there's a real difference in what you're trying to do. So when you maybe try to bring in a process like trips, which does have deadlines in there that people need to complete things by, you're sort of halfway there in terms of getting them on board, because they can see that it's going to give them a much better outcome if they follow the process.
Great, thanks for that, Mark. Shay, I might direct the next question to you. So Cameron is just wondering, can he enable suppliers or customers to input to some of those processes?
Yeah, so that comes up actually more and more these days, where people want to involve external third parties within their process. So yes, there is a facility within FlowForma called FlowForma Engage, and we have information on the website on that. And I can pass it on to you, Cameron, after this anyway. But yes, there is a facility where you can include third parties. They do not end up becoming part of your tenancy. So it is basically two pieces talking to each other, one for the external, one for the internal. So from a security point of view, everything always remains secure. That external Engage environment resides in Microsoft Azure, and basically you can have as many processes you like where you're interacting with third parties, and they can either kick off the process and or you can include them in your own process from internally.
Okay, thanks, Shay. And then there's just another question here for Mark and Lucy just around the training. So Michael here is just wondering, how did you train those key users that you were talking about, and was that a quick process?
We actually had quite a few methods of training, just because of all of the different departments, different business support areas, and also curriculum staff, and just making sure that teachers had the time put aside to attend some training. So we actually have sort of written documentation which is on SharePoint that people can sort of read through and get a better understanding of the process. We also made tutorial videos, like screen recordings, so people can watch a little video with some voiceover on how to properly complete the process. And then we also had drop-in sessions over a few weeks after the process was made live. So I think just having those options made it much easier for people to sort of, I'll just attend when I can, and not make it like a compulsory sort of, you have to be here at this time.
That's super.
Yeah, I think I was just going to add to that. One key point for me is that Lucy's been fantastic in terms of being available to the business. So you can't go live with a form and not be available to people when they've got issues. So Lucy gets out and about a lot and sees a lot of the staff who are going to use it to make sure that they understand what they're going to do, and if there's any problems, we identify them really early on.
That's amazing. Thanks for that, guys. Okay, so we're nearly at the end of our hour together. So what I'd like to do next is just thank everyone for attending today's session. If you'd like to discuss further any of the trends or the challenges that were discussed today, please contact us at info@flowforma.com. On our website, you'll be able to sign up for a free 30-day trial of FlowForma Process Automation. You can book a one-to-one demo with any of our process experts or request a callback. Lastly, I would just like to let you know that at the end of this webinar, a short survey will pop up on your screens, and I'd really appreciate if you could take a minute to fill that out. So lastly, I just want to thank you all for attending, and a special thanks to Lucy and Mark for sharing their insightful journey with us and all the results that they have achieved. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye now.